What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the channel. Today we are taking a look at the ToolkitRC's M8S. It is an upgraded version of the ToolkitRC's M8 charger discharger. Now it has all of the multifunctional features of the M8 charger discharger, like the cell checker, servo tester, receiver tester, and variable DC output controller. But now it has more power. It has 18 amps and 400 watts of power, and it also supports multi-language, and it now has a 2.4-inch true color LCD screen with dark and light modes instead of the 2.2-inch black and white screen of the M8 charger. So taking a closer look, on the top we have the 2.4-inch color display this time, and the push button jog wheel and an exit button. And in the rear we have the XT60 DC power input port, and it is now 7 volt to 30 volts instead of the 10 to 30 volts. So that's been updated as well. And because there is only the XT60 power input port, it was mainly a field charger, but there's also a 400 watt, 16.6 amp, 24 volt power supply adapter available to purchase to use with an AC power source. So now you can plug it into your wall AC outlet at home to use as a home charger, but you will have to purchase the adapter, of course. And we have the dual cooling fans. On the left, we have the USB out 5 volt at 2.1 amps and the 3-pin servo port. And on the right, we have the XT60 output port and the 2 to 8S balance port. And in the front, we have some ventilation cutouts. So the maximum charge current is 400 watts at 18 amps, and the maximum discharge current is 400 watts at 3 amps. It will weigh in at 173 grams, whereas the old M8 charger weighs in at 138 grams. So it is significantly heavier. Okay, so here are the M8 chargers on the right, both black and the white versions, and the new M8S charger on the left. Now they look almost identically the same, except for the writing on the bottom due to the 2.4-inch true color LCD screen as opposed to the 2.2-inch black and white LCD screen. So if you grab the white version, it will look just like this here. Now the screen does get scratched up somewhat easily since I've been throwing them into my backpack, so they go wherever I go, and I use them to charge up batteries out in the field, and I use them exclusively to bind receivers to the transmitter using the power output function, which is just so very nice. Okay, first let's check the status of a battery using the standalone cell voltage checker feature of this charger. So just plug in the battery that you want to check on the output XT60 port on the right side of the charger, and it should power it up. And connect the balance plug as well. Those two little notches on the balance connector, you want it facing down, and place the balance plug all the way to the left side of the balance port. And there we go. So here we can check the individual cell voltage, and it is at 3.8, most of them. And you can also check the total voltage of the battery and the state of charge, which is 52%. Okay, so let's go ahead and power up the device from the XT60 input port in the rear of the charger. And here is the new 2.4-inch 320 by 240 pixel resolution true color LCD display. Now I have it in the light mode, but you can go into the settings and change it into the dark mode. There's the dark mode, there's the light mode. I think it's a little bit brighter and I can see everything in the light mode. So I'm going to leave it in the light mode here. Now it is a beautiful color display screen compared to the M8's 132 by 64 pixel black and white LCD screen or blue and white LCD screen. So there are 4 modes here. We got the charge mode, we got the measuring mode, we got the output mode, and also we have the settings mode. Okay, so let's go into the charge mode. Press OK on the jog wheel. So we have the LiPo auto detect by default in the first profile, and there are now just 2 more profiles. Now I never needed another profile setup since I have it set to auto detect the battery, but there are 2 more additional profiles. So let's enter into the first profile. So here you can charge, discharge, and storage charge or discharge the battery. But before you do that, you can select the type of battery. Here it is selected to LiPo, but you can change it to high voltage, lithium iron, lithium ion, nickel metal hydride, and lead acid battery. Let's go back to LiPo setting. And you can also set the end voltage. So it is pre-selected to 4.2, but you can go down to 4.15, and you can up it to 4.25 here for the LiPo selection. I'm going to leave it at 4.2, and you can change the number of cells. I have it selected to auto detect, but you can choose 1S all the way up to 8S. I'm going to leave it at auto detect, and the charge current is preset to 2 amps, but you can go down all the way down to 0.1 amp and all the way up to 18 amps here on this new model. Before on the M8 you could only up to 15 amps. So let me go down and select it to 2 amps. And the discharge current can be selected to 0.1 amps all the way up to a maximum of 3 amps. The jog wheel seems to work a little bit better than the M8s. It doesn't accidentally go up or down that I've noticed. So let's go ahead and charge up a battery. So plugging in a target battery on the XT60 output port on the right side and connecting the balance connector. And let's select the charge mode and select the LiPo auto detect profile and hit charge. So we are getting prompted to charge to 16.8. You can either cancel or you can hit OK. I'm going to hit OK. So on the right side, we have the individual cells and their charge state. And on the very top, we have the input voltage, the time elapsed, and also the internal temperature of the charger, the total voltage of the target battery, the charge current, and the charge power, the capacity in milliamps charged so far, and the state of charge of the battery in percentage. Now you can scroll and check out the internal resistance of the battery. And here we have the type of battery, which is a 4S, and the input power consumed, and the charge current, which can be changed while the battery is still being charged by a long press of the jog wheel. And you can go ahead and scroll down, and you can go ahead and scroll up to the desired amps and hit OK to select the desired amps. And once the individual cells become fully charged, it will start to balance itself, and that is indicated by a square around the number of that cell. And once all of the cells are fully charged, the alarm will go off to let you know it has finished charging. All right, there we go. All right, so let's go ahead and discharge a battery. So scrolling over to discharge, hit OK, and you will be prompted with a message saying discharge to 3.5 volts per cell. You can hit OK, or you can cancel, or you can go on the value itself and hit OK. Here you can change the value to your liking. Now, as I recall, the M8 charger was by default set to 3.6 volts per cell, and I noticed that this one is set to 3.5 volts per cell. So put the value to your liking and hit OK to set it. And if you hit OK here, what will happen is the energy that is being discharged will be going into the charger itself, and it's going to be internally dissipated. Now you can go into the settings and set it so that the energy that is being discharged from the target battery to go into the input source battery. So if you go into the settings, let's go ahead and stop the charging process. Go into the settings, and if you scroll down, you're going to see that the discharge mode is set to internally dissipate. You can hit OK, and you can scroll to have it recycle, hit OK, and let's go back to discharging the battery. Now you are also prompted with an input limitation, and by default it is set to 15.7. You can hit OK and change the value of the input limitation. For example, if you are using a 3-cell battery, you want to put the values appropriately. And I'm using a 4-cell battery, so I'm going to put my input limitation to 16.8 volts. Hit OK to set it. And now if you hit OK here, the energy that is being dissipated from the target battery will now go into the input source battery. Now, the input source battery needs to be a rechargeable type of power source for this function to work, so there is no waste in energy. Now, the same thing can be had if we go into the storage charge mode. It will prompt you also with a discharge end voltage as well as the input limitation voltage as well, if the charger is set to recycle the dissipated energy from the target battery. Okay, so I never had the need to set up a new profile besides the auto detect profile, but to set up a new profile, scroll over to a new profile, hit OK, and here you can choose the type of battery. I'm going to go ahead and choose high voltage, and you can select the end voltage. By default, the high voltage is set to 4.35. You can go as high as 4.4 or as low as 4.3. And you can select the amount of cells, maybe auto detect or 1S all the way up to 8S. And also the charge current can be set here from 0.1 amp all the way up to the maximum value of 18 amps for this charger. And you can also select a discharge current as well. So that is how easy it is to set up a new profile. And if you want to remove a previously set profile, go to that particular set profile, long press the OK button, and the profile has been removed. So here's an easy way to use the M8S charger or any other ToolkitRC's battery charger to bind a transmitter to a receiver. So here I have an XM FR receiver with a 3-pin servo connector lightly soldered on. And since I just got done flashing it with the RSSI firmware already, so I had to solder on a 3-pin servo connector to do that. So this is ideally the perfect time to bind it to a transmitter as well. So here I have the Taranis QX7S here to bind. So let me power it up.
Welcome to OpenTX. Throttle warning.
And let's go into the page setup and go into the bind key and get it ready. So here I have the servo connector. I'm going to connect it to the servo port of the ToolkitRC's M8S. Make sure you got the wiring correctly. Okay, so plugging in the power source will power up the receiver as well. So what I'm going to do is, as I'm powering up the M8S charger, I'm going to hold the bind button down on the XM receiver. So very tiny little bind button. Hopefully I got it depressed. There you go. Success. So we have the red light and the green light on the receiver. So now all I have to do is go to the transmitter and hit bind.
2 minutes.
And there you go. The red light is flashing. So we have a binding process going on. So I'm going to go ahead and unplug the power source to the receiver. Exit out from the binding key on the Tyrannus and power cycle it back up. And here you go. The XM receiver is showing a solid green light indicating a successful bind. Okay, now that we have a successful bind, let's go into the measuring mode. And here we are going to choose S-Bus since the XM receiver is an S-Bus receiver. So now we are able to check the working status of the S-Bus receiver with the M8S charger. Perfect for troubleshooting and eliminating the receiver as a source of a problem. And we can scroll over to the next line of channels. And here we also see that my RSSI firmware upgrade was also successful. Okay, so we now have a PPM receiver. This is the FlySky FS A8S receiver. It's also an iBus or S-Bus receiver, as well as a PPM receiver. So I have the PPM wire connected to the Servo connector, so we can test it out as a PPM receiver. So let's go into the measurer and select PPM. First, let me go ahead and turn on my transmitter, bind to the receiver here. So, okay, there we go. So here we are in the PPM selection, and let me go ahead and hit OK. So here, once again, we are able to check the working status of the PPM receiver as well. So here in the measuring mode, we can also check the battery voltage and the internal resistance. So got a battery plugged in on the right side, and let's go ahead and hit the bat feature. And here we can check the voltage of the battery, just like the battery check function we did earlier. But since we have an input power source, we can also check the internal resistance of the battery. So changing the voltage to internal resistance and hitting test. And a couple of seconds later, you will see the internal resistance of this battery. And also, if we go back to the voltage function and hit balance, we are able to balance each individual cells here as well. Okay, so here in the measuring mode, we also have the ESC feature, where you can measure the performance of an ESC. Now we have the Volantex RC's ASW28 for this test, and the ESCs that come along with this aircraft is a brushless motor ESC rated at 30 amps, and the servo connector from the ESC is connected to the 3-pin servo port of the charger, and the power cable for the ESC will now be connected to the output XT60 port of the charger. There we go. And powering up the charger is just a 3-cell battery. So for this test, we can have the jogging wheel to increase or decrease throttle, and the start and stop feature with the push of the OK button. So let's go on over to the start, give power, and we can increase the throttle. And that is max throttle at 110%. We got 19 watts at 1.6 amps. And we have also a little visual graph of the performance measurement as well on this model. So decreasing the throttle. All right, so that's how you measure the performance of an ESC. So we have the throttle percentage, we have the output voltage, which is the same as the input voltage. We have the internal temperature of the charger, the elapsed time, the power output, and the output current. And also we see that we have the visual graph of the performance measurement. Okay, so let's go into the output mode, and here you can adjust the signal values of the PWM, PPM, and S-bus receivers by rotating the jog wheel to the selected channel and increase or decrease the output values. Also, here in the output mode, we have a power supply feature, and in the power supply feature, we have the custom mode in which you are able to output 30 volts at 9.1 amps, and there is a convenient start and stop feature as well, even though the incoming voltage to power up the charger is just 15.1 volts. And here I'm using a 4S battery to power up the charger. So the output voltage is set to 30 volts. So we are able to upscale the output voltage from the input voltage all the way up to 30 volts. So I have a XT60 connector hooked up to the M8 charger so we can measure the incoming voltage. So let's go ahead and hit start. And that should power up the M8 charger. And let's go on over to the output to measure the power that is coming in. And we can see that the input voltage is at 30 volts. So it is pretty accurate. So let's hit the stop, and that should turn off the power supply. So we can go back to the voltage, and we can even downscale below the input voltage. Let's choose about a 7.2. Since the M8 charger still powers up above 7 volts here. So let's go and select 7.2 and hit start. That should still power up the M8 charger. So let's go over to the output mode and into the power feature and check it out. The incoming voltage is 7.2 volts. So it is very accurate. It is very convenient to use this power supply feature to power up an external device via the XT60 output port, such as a soldering iron, for example. Okay, so we are able to power up an external device using the custom mode in the power supply feature, but we can also use the pass-through mode in the power supply feature as well. What this will do is it will pass through whatever the incoming voltage is to the XT60 output port. This is now really convenient, and it takes the guesswork out of choosing how many volts and such. And it is very convenient when you are trying to bind a quadcopter to a receiver that is already on the quadcopter. So I know that this quadcopter utilizes 3 to 4S batteries, and I have a 4S battery to power up the charger and pass through all of this power directly to the output XT60 connector to power up an external device. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in the quadcopter now, and I'm going to go ahead and hit that OK button to power up the quadcopter. And while I do that, I can hold the bind button on the receiver. Now the bind button on this receiver is out and about and the receiver is loose, but sometimes you have a quadcopter that you want to bind with the receiver tucked in somewhere, and you can only get to the bind button via a screwdriver or something like that. So very convenient to do that type of binding process. So I'm going to go to the start feature, get it ready. And so all I got to do is hit this OK button, and on the quadcopter, I'm going to go ahead and hold the bind button down, That is another tiny bind button. So make sure I got it depressed here and hit that OK button. And there you go. We have just put the receiver into the binding mode. As you can see, there's the red light and the green light on the receiver. So all you got to do now is go to the transmitter and hit that bind key to bind this receiver to the transmitter. Okay, so here we are at the settings mode, and it is page 1 of 3 here. So the first value that you are able to change is the lowest input value. This is set by default to 10 volts. So you want to set this to avoid depleting the input battery source. So I'll be using a 4S battery most of the time. So I'm going to set mine to 14.5. So if it goes below this voltage, it will stop the output. Input power is set to 450. I'll just leave it at that. This is the maximum power that is obtained from the input port. Safe temperature set by default to 70 degrees Celsius. So if it goes above this temperature, the device will stop. As well as the safe external temperature set to 50 degrees Celsius. Safe time is set to 120 minutes. If it goes beyond this time limit, the device will stop as well. I usually set mine to about 70 or 80 minutes because it usually takes me about 60 minutes to charge up all of my batteries. So I'm going to safely set it at 80 minutes. The discharge mode, we've been through this. We have set it to internally dissipate, or you can also change it to recycle the energy into the input power source. Idle beep, it is set to 5 minutes. So if the device is not operating for this amount of duration, which is 5 minutes, the sound and the light will disconnect. So the S-bus value, this displays the mode of S-bus. You can set it to pulse width is what it is set by default, or original value. Next is the backlight. It is the brightness level of the backlight set to 8 by default. You can go up to 10 and all the way down to 1. I'll set mine to about 7. That looks pretty good. So the buzzer is the loudness of the buzzer. And off. Louder the better. Okay, continuous work. So it is set to off by default, but if you set it to on, it will continue charge and discharge even after replacing the battery. Okay, the knob wheel. It adjusts the sensitivity of the knob wheel or the jog wheel. You can set it to fast, normal, or slow. And next is the theme style. We've been through this one as well. I have it set to light. You can set it to dark. I kind of like the light mode. You can see it a lot better. Next is language. You can change from English, German, French, Italian, and Chinese. Set to English. And here we can restore all settings to default values. And you need to hit it twice for that to happen. There you go. Back to default values. And also there are some preset values to charge up some DJI products in the power supply feature in the output mode. So down pressing on the custom value and scrolling to the right, we have a preset value for the Mavic 2, 17.6 volts, 3.8 amps, for the Mavic S, the Phantom, and the Inspire. And to upgrade the firmware, use the provided USB to USB cable and connect the charger to a PC. Download the app.upg file on the official website. I'll leave a link down below, and overwrite the existing file in the device. It works just like a USB flash drive. To manually calibrate the voltage, if the voltage reading is off, hold down the jog wheel while powering up the charger at the same time, and the charger will enter into the manual calibration function. So you can go ahead and plug in the battery that you already have used a voltmeter or an accurate cell voltage checker to measure each of the voltage of the cells, and you can go ahead and match the values to the corresponding cell to calibrate. So this is the box that the M8S came in. It is the same box that the M8 charger came in. And also we have the USB to USB interface cable. And also we are given this small instruction pamphlet, which doesn't go through any of the detailed instructions, but there is a PDF file instruction manual in the website. So I'll leave a link down below for that PDF file instruction manual. So if you have already seen my video of the original ToolkitRC M8 charger, this video with the M8S charger will be very familiar and almost identical to the M8 charger video. That is because the M8S is almost identical to the M8 charger, but now the M8S charger has a bigger true color LCD screen and has more power. So if you are on a budget but want to try out this charger, the original M8 charger is a very capable charger with the same charge, discharge, and all of the multifunctional features of the M8S. But if you can afford an extra $20, more power and bigger color LCD screen can be had. So that will conclude this video for the ToolkitRC's M8S charger, discharger, and so much more. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching. Have a great day, and we'll see you again next time.